The presidential debate. It's a tradition that has been passed through many generations in this country. Every 4 years, we have the primary candidate for each party take the stage to debate one another. Each candidate brags about their successes, while at the same time they highlight their opponent's shortcomings. Each candidate claims they have the best plan for making the lives of the American people better. But are they really productive? Are voters actually able to make well-informed decisions based on what these candidates say on the stage? Do people actually get any useful information from these debates, or are we just watching some form of bizarre theater before the election? Well, this is what we're going to be discussing in this segment. Let's dive in. So we've made it through 2 presidential debates this year. We had our first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and the second between the vice presidential candidates, Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. Now, I can assure you I am not alone when I say that these debates sucked. Now, we're supposed to be getting a third one. We might not at this point. It may be canceled. I'm not even sure at this point. But the ones we've had so far were absolutely terrible. And the reason I think they're terrible is because they're not useful, beneficial, or helpful in any way. In fact, I think they might be more harmful than good. There are going to be people on both sides who tell you that the debate was fantastic and their candidate absolutely crushed it and destroyed the other guy. People on both sides think this about the other side. And I think they're in the wrong there. I think these debates were not helpful whatsoever, and I think there are 3 main reasons that these debates are not useful or helpful, and that is why I think they suck. I think there should be a purpose to them. It shouldn't be some form of just clippable entertainment theater that we watch for the heck of it right before the election, right? It's meant to inform people and help people make decisions on why they're choosing the candidates they're choosing. Okay? So, with that said, let's get into the first reason I think the debates sucked. The first reason I think that these debates were awful is simply due to the fact that America has been just heavily polarized with the impact of social media on these elections and everything to do with that. So if you've watched, many of you may have seen this already, the social dilemma, or you've seen research onto how social media is affecting people's political views. You know that depending on a certain set of beliefs you have, these algorithms on social media determine what information to show you and to basically advertise onto your pages and to put in ads for you to see on the internet. And it essentially is certain sets of information that are going to, reinforce your beliefs in a certain candidate, and they're going to either leave things out or not show you the full story because they want to, pull you in more towards what you already tend to believe. So, if you're a big fan of Biden, or you kind of lean towards some of the beliefs of what Biden has, you're going to be shown a lot of, the facts and information that have to do with things that his side and his party is putting out. And it's going to just back those facts up and reaffirm those things. And then also at the same time, spread things that are bad about Trump, vice versa too. If you're a big Trump fan, you're going to see things that support Trump and that are against Biden. And it's going to build up those beliefs in, each party. And while there might be a little bit of truth in each data set that these groups have, there could also be a lot of misinformation, a lot of false information, and basically stuff that's going to make you believe your candidate and hate the other candidate. So that is very unhelpful with these debates, because I think that is where the group of people comes from that actually enjoyed the debates extremely and were like, my candidate absolutely crushed it. He destroyed that other guy, because their candidate gets up there and just repeats the same things that they've been hearing online, right? They get up and they say X, Y, and Z about themselves to make themselves look better, trash the other candidate, and all the things that they have said appear to be true to that viewer because that is what they have been told, and so they believe. So we get in this loop where we're stuck, where you're going to have people on each side that aren't really convinced by the other side because there's nothing that's going to change their mind because they're looking at 2 different sets of information. So that is one big reason the debates suck. The people that are stuck in their camps are kind of stuck in their camps with these debates. The debates aren't structured in a way that can change people's mind and that can, lay out information for these people to make better informed decisions, because they believe that the stuff coming from the other side is just a bunch of lies and, mistruths. So that leads me to the second problem with the debates, and that is the structure. So before we dive into everything I think is wrong with the structure of these debates, I want you to just take a look at some clips thrown together from the debates that kind of highlight how this thing pretty much played out. If you've seen it, it'll be a good refresher. If not, here you go.
Radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is...
Here's the deal. The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
God, I want to make
Mr.
sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that.
That is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obamacare.
Sir,
Chris,
you're
that was the
debating
worst
him,
part
not
of
me.
Obamacare.
Let me ask my question.
Well, I'll ask Joe. The individual mandate was the most unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of it.
I'd like you
and
to,
we will protect
Mr.
people
President,
with
I'm the moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer your question.
Go ahead. They were teaching people that our country is a horrible place, it's a racist place, and they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Vice President Biden?
Nobody's doing that. He's the racist.
You just don't know.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about this than he does.
Let him finish.
People out there need help.
But why didn't you do it over the last 25 years?
Because you weren't
Why didn't you do it over
Because
the
you
last
weren't
25
president
years?
screwing things up.
You were a senator. And
You're
by
the
way,
worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on. His own
this is a left-wing.
FBI director
This
said
is a
the threat
left-wing
of
problem.
white
This
supremacy.
is
The
radical
question-
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
right.
Gentlemen, I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to pack the
unprecedented.
court.
We have
We're not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't
well,
do a good
here's
job.
The,
With you,
Go ahead.
they
You
say-
get
here's the
wait a
deal.
minute. You get the final word, Mr.
well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me, this.
Hey, let me just say, Joe.
No. Mr. President.
$3.5
Mr.
million,
President.
Joe.
And I'll be a president not just for the Democrats. I'll be a president for Democrats and Republicans. And this guy,
I want to
if
see
in
an
fact,
honest
Okay.
ballot cut.
Gentlemen,
We-
you say that's the end
Chris,
of it? This is the
I
end
wanna
of this
see an
debate?
honest ballot count.
Okay, so you see how quickly that debate went downhill and how we didn't really get anything useful from a lot of stuff that happened there. Now, what I want to do, before we get into these next two sections of the structure of the debate and the people involved in the debate, I want to show you what I think the debate should be. I'm going to show you a clip from what would also be called a debate. I think of it even more as a discussion, but it would be a debate between two people, and they have a moderator, just kind of like this with the president. And I want you to notice a few things as you watch the clip. I want you to notice the moderator, how their involvement is, what their job is, what they do, their interaction. I want you to notice the structure between the two things. Like the presidential structure, you've seen that there's a moderator, the candidates have like 2 minutes to speak, 90 seconds to respond, there's cutoffs and stuff like that. Then I want you to notice if there's any type of structure over here in this other debate. I want you to pay attention, like I said, to limited time, cutoffs, that sort of thing. Pay attention to the candidates as well. See if they're being theatrical for like the audience, seeing if they're trying to maybe bash the other person. We'll call them the other candidate, the other person. See if they're trying to insult the other person to, prove their point, or if they brag on themselves, who they brag on at all. Pay attention to a lot of these things, and I want you to compare the two. And then we'll come back and talk about and compare and contrast the two different debates and see where the one is going wrong and maybe where the other one is going right. So go ahead and take a look at the other one now.
Jordan and Sam have given me the honor of moderating this debate or discussion, depending on how you view it, and I think that actually creates a certain kind of responsibility, and I want to talk to you about my responsibility and how I see it, and my sense of how you all have responsibility in this as well.
But I just want to express my motive for helping to stage these events, and because I I reached out to Jordan, and it really was born of seeing him in conversation with people other than myself. I saw him do a podcast with Joe Rogan. I saw him speak to Dave Rubin. I saw him speak with Brett on Rogan's podcast. And I had so much admiration for him in those conversations. So 90% of what he said in those conversations struck me as really wise and useful and well-intentioned. And 10% didn't. But I noticed that it's clear to me that seeing these successful conversations with other people who I respect, I began to wonder that I might be the problem. And I think I am the problem. Well, before you applaud, maybe I didn't mean that quite the way you took it. I think it's a good sort of problem for Jordan to have, because it's what happens on those 10% moments and what doesn't happen that I think made our conversation so hard, and I think there is stuff to clarify between us. So I look forward to doing that, and thank you, Jordan, for agreeing to do this.
I thought what I might do is just lay out some places that I think Sam and I agree, and because there's lots of places we agree. And then I want to figure out where we disagree, which I've been trying to sort out, and then I want to see if we can hash it out a little bit and move forward on that a bit. So I'm going to lay out. See, one of the things that Carl Rogers said, the psychologist, was that a good way to have a discussion with someone is to tell them what you think they think until they think that what you said reflects what they said. But look, this is a really useful thing to know if you're ever having a discussion with an intimate partner, for example, is that you have to put their argument back to them in terms they agree with. It's very difficult. So I'm going to try to do that. And so the first thing is, I think that partly what's driving you, if this is accurate, is that you want to ground a structure of ethics in something solid. And there's two things you want to avoid, two catastrophes, let's say. One is the catastrophe that you identified with religious fundamentalism, and the other is the catastrophe that's associated with moral relativism. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. Okay, well, no, but it's... Okay, so it's crucially important that we get this right. Now, and that's something that I think we really agree on, because I've conceptualized that slightly different than you, and that might be relevant, but I think of that as a pathology of order and a pathology of chaos. So the terminology is slightly different, but I think we're working on the same axis. So that's the first thing. And then in order to do that, it seems to me, that's your first priority. And then maybe your second priority is something like, you see undue suffering in the world, plenty of it, and you would think that things would be better if that wasn't the case, and that this morality, whatever it's going to be, is at least going to ground itself in part on the presupposition that the less undue suffering in the world, the better. Is that also reasonable?
Yeah, I would just add to that the positive side of the continuum as well.
I want you to let me step in. I think I can.
We need to bring you guys.
Get us somewhere. All right. I'm going to start with you, Sam.
Okay.
Let's swap out the idea of metaphorical truth for something a little harder-headed. Heuristics, right? We have heuristics. We use them to perceive the world. They're often highly reliable. In fact, almost everything that you believe that lets you operate has to be a heuristic of some kind. I mean, if you decided to learn to drive and you got into the car and they said, okay, well, it's all quarks out there, right? You need to understand how quarks interact with each other.
Not useful.
Right, not useful, right?
You fractionate the moral belief system and you end up with a nihilistic situation. So as you move away from dogmatism, you move towards the parallel danger, which is moral relativism and nihilism. And so hopefully you can find some balance. So let me ask you...
No, I want to ask you a question.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah. So, and also, what time do we actually stop this part? Because it's 10.
I just missed the time card. But I think we have another couple of minutes. Okay. So...
There's no objective reality to time, I think.
Actually, it's a pretty good conversation we could have. But
okay.
So here's my question for you. Is... If we agree that there is some way in which religious texts carry some kind of value because they allow people to figure out how to navigate their lives in ways that might reduce suffering, reduce the complexity of the choices that they have to make.
So, for sake of time, I could only clip certain moments from that, but I definitely encourage you to go watch these full debates between these two. It's very engaging, very good to watch, and I think they did this for multiple nights. I think in total it was 3 or 4, and they're each about 2 hours long and very good debates. But just some things I wanted to go over. If you notice a few different things, for instance, we'll address the structure first, and then we'll get into like the character of the people. So, between the two different debates, you had the presidential debates and the debates here between Peterson and Harris, and you notice the structure of it, right? So the presidential debates, you get the moderator. The moderator's there. They're like, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. You have 90 seconds to respond to this question. Then you have 2 minutes to say yours, and then 90 seconds to respond. And they cut them off, and they don't feel like they have enough time. They interrupt each other, and it just breaks down into chaos. So I think like the time cutoffs, limited amount of time, the moderator themselves, all cause problems in the presidential debate. Notice the difference between the presidential debate moderators and the moderator they had there with Brett Weinstein. So, if you'll notice, I included a few clips of where the moderator, Brett, did interject into the conversation of Peterson and Harris, and it was never to cut them off. He sat there quietly most of the time. I had to pull the clip from later on in the debate because he did just sit there and listen. And that's really what the moderator's job should be. The moderator's job is to be there in case the two people having the debate get hung up or go way off the rails, right? And that's also where the, candidates themselves or the people having the debate themselves come into play, right? Because you can't have wild off the hook people in the debate, or the moderator's going to have to be jumping in constantly. So there is something to be said for the character and the, way Harris and Peterson handled themselves that led the moderator to not have to interject that much. But even when he did, it was the only reason he interjected was because he wanted to help where the two guys were getting hung up on something, right? They weren't lining up exactly. They weren't able to see something exactly the same, the topic they were discussing. And he was trying to bridge that gap and help them see what the other person was seeing, right? To get them onto the same page so they could continue to have the discussion. The moderator's there to keep the discussion moving and help everyone stay on the same page, essentially. And I think that's a wonderful role. And the moderators we've had for the presidential debates have just been there to assign the topics and, cut people's time off and almost debate the candidates themselves. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with topics necessarily. Presidents need to cover more topics than just, Peterson and Harris were talking about there. They were kind of discussing one thing, diving into the depth of it. But over the presidential debates, you could have a certain amount of time you're going to talk about a topic, but 2 minutes per little thing isn't really enough. And that doesn't give the American people enough time to really look at the conversation, glean anything from it, other than what they already hear on news or social media or wherever it comes from. It's just rehashing of the same stuff. So another thing you notice about the structure is that they were freely able to talk because of this. It was them having a conversation, right? And this is kind of where it drifts into the candidates themselves and how they would have to behave themselves for a debate to work like this, because structure can only do so much. You can set it up. You could have that same debate stage with the same moderator, and instead of Harris and Peterson, put Trump and Biden in those chairs, and it would still turn into absolute chaos and breakdown. And that's because it has to do with candidates themselves. And I don't know how you would fix this other than, convince the candidates they need to sit down and talk like this, or just get new candidates altogether, right? It's at some point, it's on them to behave themselves in the proper manner. So first thing is, if you notice about what I call the good debate that I showed you, is when they sit down, they talk about their motives, and they talk about how, what is it Peterson said? He says, tell them what you think they think until they think what you said reflects what they said. And he's talking about them getting an understanding of each other. So imagine a conversation between the two presidential candidates where they're talking about goals, right? And in the grand scheme of things, both candidates up there should have the goal of, bettering the lives of everyone in this country, right? They should want better lives for the American people all around, whatever's best for the country. And with that goal in mind, that should be what's driving them forward with the plans they propose and the ideas they're going to discuss. They should have the same goal. But when they get up there, you wouldn't think that that's what it's about at all. I didn't get the impression that it was about, helping the American people. What I get the impression when these candidates get up there is that each one's trying to win against the other and have the best, diss against the other candidate and the best, self-ego booster for themselves, said sometime during the debate. And then that's who wins, and yay, they won, woohoo, and then go on to win the election. It doesn't seem to be about helping people. So, again, they've got to start from that place. So if they were to come up there and, maybe they were going to, let's take the topic, what was one of the big topics? Maybe the protests versus riots versus law enforcement and, what kind of reforms need to happen there. So both of them should approach the conversation with the goal of saying, a lot of people, taking note of all the people that have been hurt, whether it be from the riots, from law enforcement themselves, or have been protected from law enforcement, anything that had to do with the subject. The goal should be for less people to be harmed by whatever systems are in place, and less harm from, other citizens acting up, whatever it may be. And then they should discuss it, right? It should be a discussion about, what harm did the riots cause? What harm have law enforcement caused? What protections have law enforcement, put in place that have been beneficial? What areas need reform? What don't? And give good reasons as to why. Not silly arguments attacking the other person saying, hey, you stood for this, but then we don't have any explanation on why standing for that is bad. We just are supposed to know it's bad. It's nice to hash out these discussions and get to the bottom of things, but they don't get to do that. They have 2 minutes to state all the things they did that are supposedly good and state all the things that the other person did that are supposedly bad. And while that may be true, may not be true, we don't have any explanation as to why it's good or bad. So again, if the purpose of these debates is supposed to be for the people watching to understand what is happening and understand why president or this candidate's plan would be better than that candidate's plan, they need to understand how it works and the reasons behind it and why the candidate is proposing these plans. So you have all of that. If you also notice in the Better Debate, they lay a lot of ground and they discuss areas in which they agree. And again, that comes back to having the same goal. And you got to find the areas in which you agree, right? So you agree that, again, we can approach the topic of law enforcement, or we could take COVID-19, for instance. Both candidates can agree that they don't want people getting COVID-19, probably, and they don't want people dying from COVID-19, and they don't want people, getting sick, spreading around. They can find all the areas they agree on. Then after that, let's say COVID, they could move on to what ways they think are best for handling the COVID crisis, and the consequences of the actions they'll take to deal with it. You could say, hey, one candidate may think they need to shut down more things. One thinks they need to open more stuff up because the consequence of shutting down is more deadly. And then they can discuss numbers and things like that and get into the details of it. But they don't get to that. They don't even lay the groundwork on where they agree. It just seems like they have to disagree, or it's all or nothing. And like I said, the moderator interjecting, not handled very well in the presidential debates, and moderators there to essentially make sure that everyone's on, the same page, able to come to a solution. All in all, though, I think that's the big problem. The goal of these presidential candidates is to get out there, win, make themselves look better, and the goal of the people in the other debate we watched was to get to the bottom of a topic and find out the best way we should think about things moving forward. So I don't know that these debates would ever get to that point, and we will ever have a time when a presidential debate is something that's actually enjoyable to watch and American people can actually get something from it, as long as it's set up with a combination of these factors. and with the people we're getting into these positions. And this is not to advocate for one candidate over the other. I'm not here to address the topics of that other debate I showed you, or the topics really of the debate, or the plans or beliefs of the candidates. I just wanted to talk about how crappy it is for everyone who has to sit through and watch this stuff that's supposed to be helpful and help us make better informed decisions, and really it's just another thing that's kind of in the way of that and not helpful at all. But that's pretty much all I've got on this segment. I'm going to go ahead and actually throw in the links to those other debates I showed you. If you just want some good quality content to watch, you can click those and go watch those, maybe see, what a real debate's supposed to look like and what people having a good conversation is all about. But I thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you in the next segment. Y'all have a good one.